Oil and gas production in Nigeria has failed to meet the quota set by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, in the past 2 years, thus negatively impacting on the nation's revenue and the operations of companies. However, Nigeria's President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress, APC, has promised to strike early deals with oil companies, reverse the massive divestment underway, and agree on improved fiscal regimes in a bid to boost oil and gas production and stimulate Africa's biggest economy. According to the 75-page manifesto of the president-elect, it was stated that his government will raise gas production by 20% and complete gas infrastructure projects by 2027. Before we bring in our guest this morning, let's take a look at Georgina Ndukwe-Izanyika's report on the oil and gas sector of Nigeria. Well, joining us now on this show to discuss Bola Tinubu's plan for the oil and gas sector, Ademola Adigun, an oil and gas expert, joins us. Welcome to the morning show. Good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Abate. Good morning.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Well, I know that the main focus is the future of the oil and gas sector. But let's start with the Dangote Refinery that is going to be commissioned today. Big event in Nigeria, in Lagos State, in Africa. What do you think is the significance of that development? Dangote Refinery, we're told, will produce 650,000 barrels per day. In addition to how it will address the energy supply issues facing Nigeria. What's your take on this major development?
Okay. Thank you very much. So Dangote would use 650,000 barrels per day, not produce. What it will produce is petrol, kerosene, aviation fuel, 3 million liters of petrol per day, 30 liters of kerosene per day, and about 40 liters of aviation fuel per day. That's a promise. What Dangote Refinery will do for Nigeria, it will give us a market for our crude. In the last few months, we have struggled to sell some of the crude we've produced. It will reduce our dependence on import products. It will create more jobs in the economy. It will start more companies in the downstream because a lot of companies associated with refinery products will find products to utilize. It will bring revenue for us, estimated about $10 billion annually when it's on full stream. It will reduce smuggling across border because it has capacity to apply both Nigeria and our neighbors. It will have an impact on our GDP if all things are going well. But this will not be immediate. The commission today is symbolic. It's the start of a process, not the completion of a process. There are still things to sort out in terms of supply chain issues. There are still issues around evacuation of the products to local markets. And there's still the issue of subsidy, which is the overhanging issue in the oil and gas sector now in terms of downstream products. So it's the start of a magnificent thing, but not the completion. It's going to be a game changer in the next 2-3 years, depending on the policy of government and how well Bola Tinubu and his team can implement what they promised in their plan and the significant environmental issues around it as well.
So thank you for that, and I'm glad you ended on that note, because my question around the plan, oil and gas plan, as stated by the President-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is what we would like to discuss. But before we go into that, I want us to look back, because I believe that there's some lessons that we can learn, especially from promises made previously, what went wrong, why it couldn't be achieved, and how the next administration would then begin to do that. One of such is that President Muhammadu Buhari had said he was going to revolutionize and resurrect the oil refineries in Nigeria. Unfortunately, this hasn't been done in 8 years. So from your perspective as an expert, what were the challenges and why has it been an impossibility? Because if these issues, yes, Dangote Refinery is privately owned largely, but if we had such infrastructure that wasn't maintained properly and now lies almost moribund, then what is the expectation that this new refinery would not follow the same line, would not have the same end, or perhaps end up in that way? Because these are some of the questions. Then before we begin to talk about the new plans, what happened to the old plans? Why didn't it work? Why wasn't it successful?
Thank you for that question. First of all, let's start by saying President Buhari did something very significant. He signed the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Bill, into law. That bill had been hanging in previous government for the past 20-something years. And so you must applaud him for doing that. That was the start of a journey. And he did that, signed the law. But that wasn't enough. The problems about the refineries beyond promises by any government. My view, and this is my view, is government shouldn't be the investor in refineries or the one repairing refineries and all that. Remember that in 2007, Obasanjo had disposed refineries to the same Dangote we're celebrating today. Dangote had bought the refineries from government. And then Yar'Adua came on board and reversed the sales. A lot of things happened between then. I mean, I think Obasanjo, after years in government, had learned that the refineries were not something the government should be in the business of, and let it to Dangote. I mean, if Dangote had taken the refineries, possibly he would have saved more money than the $19 billion is invested in the new refinery. Possibly we've created more jobs in Kaduna, Port Harcourt, and Warri with existing refineries. Possibly would have reduced our dependence on imports. But the challenge always goes to two things. It's not a lack of ideas or initiatives. The issue is about political will. The political will to make things happen is always a problem, and capture. When governments come into power, they come into people who are in government entrenched interest, who have been there for so many years, who enjoy returns from the current rot, and therefore do not want things to change. Now, some things have happened in the last few years. NNPC has become a commercial entity on paper, not yet totally in practice, but they're getting there. NNPCL, we look at its profit and loss balance sheet. Does it make sense to keep 3.5 refineries on your sheet, paying salaries, paying wages, promoting people or not promoting them, when you're not making any money or revenue from it? Is it time to let it go? Sadly, the Dangote refinery will make those refineries a little bit more obsolescent. Now, if Dangote refinery has the capacity to meet Nigerian market needs, which investors will come in and buy refineries that really have no market for products, which will take a lot more investment than can done. So a lot of things went wrong. Part of what went wrong was subsidy issue. Nobody will put money in a business when you can't sell your products at market prices. Now, Dangote is located in an export-free zone. That means he doesn't have to sell to us at local prices. He can sell to us at additional prices, and therefore he won't make a loss. Now, government has to make a decision. Do we continue buying at international price and sell at a discount to Nigerians and incur huge losses and humongous losses locally? Do we take out subsidy in a way where we don't put too much pain on Nigerians and allow the industry to thrive? Then we do implement the PIA as well as should be implemented and amend some laws. So there are environmental context issues, there are political context issues, and there are much economic decisions that need to be made. But the idea and the challenge has always been for every government that comes in is capture. Okay. And I said somewhere else again, the other issue that comes is lack of understanding of what's really happening in the sector. Okay. We know people outside government always feel they know more than people in government. There's when people outside government think, oh, they're so smart, they know better than people in government, that all the information they have is new, revolutionary. But problems of government are not ideas or new information. Is that ability to implement those ideas, ability to deal with capture, ability to deal with political interference, and ability to take decisions that are firm and hard and continue with them. So that's what went wrong with the last administration.
Thank you so much for that. We'll quickly take a look at Georgina Nkwezeka's report on oil and gas sector for Nigeria. Then we'll come back and ask some more questions.
The petroleum sector has been riddled with several challenges, aside the exodus of some international oil companies from the fields. Nigeria has seen rising crude oil theft, leading to reduced output and exports. But the signing into law of the Petroleum Industry Act, described as one of the most progressive oil and gas legislation in decades, can be said to be one of the legacies of the outgoing Buhari administration. Key changes introduced by the PIA include establishing 2 new regulatory authorities for all upstream and midstream downstream oil and gas activities, improved host communities considerations, as well as establishing NNPC Limited as a business-focused entity with a new brand identity.
It's a corporation that existed for over 40 years, upward of 50 years, and now it has transformed into a limited. And in over 40 years of its existence, it made losses, huge losses, enough to have folded up any corporation. but in the past 2 years or so, it started making profits. So I think what has happened today is a huge and significant development.
This company must do what other companies are doing. I can see many businesses here. We must do what they are doing. You must meet the terms and conditions of the Company and Allied Matters Act. You must also meet the requirements of a memorandum and article of association. And you must also meet the requirements of the petroleum industry. The combined effect of all of them is that you cannot lose money. You must deliver value to your shareholders. You must deliver energy security to our country. You must be accountable and transparent to your shareholders. So it's no longer an option.
President Muhammadu Buhari also signed into law another landmark legislation, the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendment Bill. The law significantly increases Nigeria's share of earnings from oil wells offshore the country. The implementation of the Decade of Gas initiatives, the launch of the National Gas Expansion Program, increase in the establishment of liquefied petroleum gas plants are the other areas of achievements. The Decade of Gas 2030 seeks to grow gas demand at a compound annual growth rate of 16.6% annually, driven by major projects such as the NLNG Train 7, Nigeria-Morocco Pipeline, NLNG Train 8, Bras Fertilizer, and the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano Gas Pipeline Project.
And will flow 2 billion scoop of gas. And what this means is that you are delivering 2 billion scoop of gas every day into this line, powering industries, powering power plants, creating gas-based industries. And this is the ultimate objective.
I want to believe the outgoing government would attribute this as one of their achievements, putting down a master plan to help develop and effectively make use of our natural gas. What is your take on how far we've gone with the Decade of Gas for 2030, which is to ensure that every Nigerian has access to gas, especially cooking gas?
Nigeria has proved reserve of more than 200 trillion cubic feet of gas. And the potential gas that Nigeria has is in excess of 600 trillion cubic feet. Means Nigeria is even more of a gas nation than an oil nation. But ask yourself a practical question. As far as I'm concerned, from natural gas, you will get ammonia. From ammonia, you will get urea. From urea, you are going to get fertilizer. But as I speak to you right now, a bag of fertilizer that used to cost 2,000 or 3,000 Nigerian naira is more than 25,000 Nigerian naira. So, I mean, from that angle, I don't have any justification to say we are faring or doing well.
We look at a lot of our issues like it's just one answer. It's not one answer. They're multifactorial. So we need to know what the factors are within LPG. Why is cooking gas getting more expensive? If it is part of our agenda to make cooking gas more available, which means it should be available in the villages, which will enable even development. So why is it more expensive? Why do we have scarcity when we have not even reached 50% penetration? Those are questions to ask. And it is based on the information that comes from there that we can now access progress. And it's possible that when you're doing the progress report or progress analysis, that there will be some progress in some areas and lack of progress in certain areas.
Since 1958, we've been producing oil. When the first oil well was discovered in Oloibiri, we are still flaring oil. It is sad, it's unfortunate, not to talk of the health hazard. It's like it's environmental pollution. We are killing our own people and killing our economic resources. Why we have not been able to find a solution to harness what we are burning and create it into money is beyond me. The technology is there.
Despite these progress made so far, the sector still grapples with increased crude oil theft that has drastically affected Nigeria's production output, resulting in significant revenue losses. This in addition to sabotage on oil and gas facilities by Niger Delta militants in 2016. Funds in the excess crude account, which stood at $2.2 billion in 2015, dropped to $72 million in 2020. a 96% drop. To curb theft, the government had to employ the services of local vigilantes, private and government security forces to secure the pipelines. So far, some suspects have been arrested and stolen crude recovered.
So upon getting the truck and inspecting it, we discovered it was carrying crude oil. They did argue initially that it was sludge, but we have enough experience to differentiate between sludge and crude oil. So that gave us the confidence to enter the place and go in for inspection. And we inspected the barge and discovered that the barge had 12 tanks, of which one with the evidence of crude oil was emptied, and then there were 2 other tanks that still had crude oil to some extent.
The protracted plan to remove fuel subsidy payments is another challenge faced by the Buhari administration. From all indications, the current administration may be leaving this decision for the incoming Tinubu government to make. The president-elect has promised to create an industry which successfully utilizes its vast resources, take advantage of high oil prices to generate necessary revenue, successful diversification, and ensure self-sufficiency in meeting demand for petroleum products.
Even though we are looking for more fields, we are not exploiting, we are not maximizing the current fields that we have. Significantly, our production has fallen low. As at now, we are lower than Angola, which used to be like half of our production. And a number of other things are affecting us. So, while we're searching for more fields, we need to also be doing the job of maximizing the fields that we have.
As far as I'm concerned, there was a time we were told that some oil companies were shutting down or leaving Nigeria. To be honest, based on my experience of the Nigerian oil and gas industry, they were not actually divesting, because there is a difference between divesting and trying to make sure they look for other things. They were actually running away from business climate hostilities, because divesting is different from diversification. They were not diversifying, and they were not actually divesting. They were running to cheaper, better, and safer investment havens.
Dangote's refinery coming on stream is a major game changer in the oil and gas sector. As the last check, I believe it will be producing about 650,000 barrels of oil a day. It is a milestone that we've never seen in Nigeria, especially at this time when all our refineries are moribund. We are spending a lot of money on importation of petroleum products. We are producing and not refining. So with Dangote coming on board and on stream, it means that the oil and gas sector, the oil industry in Nigeria will experience a major shakeup.
As listed in his Renewed Hope campaign manifesto, Tinubu wants to increase crude oil production to 2.6 million barrels per day by 2027 and 4 million barrels per day by 2030. Establish a special enforcement and monitoring unit whose sole mandate will be to protect the nation's pipelines by deploying technological interventions. Achieve full deregulation of midstream gas prices within 6 months. Increase gas production by 20% and complete critical gas infrastructure projects by 2027. Experts in the industry say the incoming government needs to put the right persons in place to ensure their campaign promises are fulfilled.
We have an industry where we have had people who do not have the capacity, who don't have the required or requisite experience. Even when they have the requisite experience, corruption takes over. And by virtue and nature of our society, there are no checks and balances, there are no penalties, people are not held accountable for lack of performance.
We need to agree that we want to have development. So we do not put agendas, perspectives ahead of national development. And if that is the case, irrespective of who comes in, there are certain things that will not change. And one of those things fundamentally is that I do not see anything changing with the decade of gas, if progress is the direction. And then our thinking with respect to energy transition, which are so fundamental to the issues, we should not have any changes there.
With some developing countries cutting down on the use of fossil fuel, stakeholders fear Nigeria's oil and gas sector may no longer sustain the economy. Although Tinubu has promised to ensure diversification of the economy when he comes into office, experts say a boost in the mining of precious stones, agriculture, and other minerals is also crucial.
Nigeria has so much coal. Till today, Nigeria has not been able to transform her coal to generate energy. There are so many developed economies that are still relying on coal today, despite the move towards renewable energy. South Africa is one, China is another, because it's the truth. And I can mention many countries. We have not been able to take advantage of our deposit of coal and bitumen.
Irrespective of whatever the world is saying, our industries need to develop independent of oil. Agric needs to function and be profitable. Health needs to function and be profitable. Education needs to function and be profitable. Every industry needs to run independent of each other. They need to function and be profitable. It has nothing to do with global trends. It is just how the economy will be balanced.
As Nigeria struggles to meet up with the OPEC production quota, very few people benefit from illegal activities. The economy is impacted, and the average Nigerian continues to suffer. If this trend is not tackled, the ability of the incoming government to pursue the much-needed infrastructural development may be hampered by lack of revenues. The Tinubu administration, when it takes over on the 29th of May 2023, has a huge task of stabilizing the oil and gas sector, as well as urgently driving diversification of the economy. Georgina Ndukwezaika, Arise News.
Right, wonderful report there by Georgina. We still have Ademola Adigun, an oil and gas expert, with us on the morning show. You heard that report there. So, a couple of things. Number one, why is it that it's so hard for us to be able to go beyond the 2.5 million barrel per day mark in Nigeria? And in looking forward, how can we extend that even further, owing to the fact that we only have about 30, 40 years, you know, because all the climate agreements started kicking in a threshold of 30, 40 years. I think the last time we hit 2.5 million barrel per day was the 1977-78 quota. And I think early 2000, I think 2005 thereabout, we tried hitting, the 2.5 billion mark. But since then, we've been far away from that. Secondly, please regale me with the numbers again. You said, definitely we all know that when we say 650,000 ppd per day, that's what we process from crude. But we all know when you have fractional distillation happen, what happens is that you get your kerosene, you get your petrol, you get your heavy oil, you get your diesel. Did I hear you correctly? You said 3 million barrels per day, 3 million liters per day for petrol. How many million liters per day did you say there? Can you break down those numbers again? Okay. How many million liters per day will this Dangote refinery do?
Let's start it with.
What's the number per day?
It has a capacity for 53 million liters of petroleum.
Okay, 5-3. So 5-3. Okay, 53 million liters. So that pretty much takes care of our daily needs.
Yes.
Okay, good. So go ahead.
If we use the actual numbers.
Okay.
All right. So if we use the actual numbers, it will produce over 53 million liters of petroleum per day, about 30 million liters of kerosene, and 14 million liters of aviation fuel. It will utilize 650,000 barrels of crude per day to produce that. So that's capacity for 650,000 barrels utilization. The NNPC Limited has promised it that by this week, it will deliver 300,000 barrels per day. Where we get the difference might be through importation or through other means. I mean, Dangote Refinery has some issues around supply chain issues. There are issues around connection to the fields. There are issues around single point of loading, because right now, there's no pipeline connecting to the fields. It has to use single more points, which is bringing a ship into the refinery and discharging it into the refinery. Yeah. So there's still a lot of issues sorted out in that area as per. Yeah, and then there's issues of how we even get the petrol into the market systems. I mean, we have 5,100 2 kilometers of pipeline built by the NNPC, largely moribund, largely not functional. That needs to be repaired, and that's a lot of things needs to be done. So it's still not uhuru for the government in terms of the oil and gas downstream chain. But it's a beginning of something significant. On your documentary, a lot of questions were said. The current administration wants to grow production. We've done a lot of good things in the last 8 years. The fiscal terms have very much improved. Fiscal terms which govern how much you would make and how much you would lose investing in oil are better than they were some 6 years ago. So that's better. But we haven't touched the environmental issues, the cost of doing business. See, oil and gas is not immune from other things in an economy. In an economy where we have high rate of insecurity, when you have high rate of regulators not following their own rules and laws, when you have poor judicial interpretation, every investor is cautious. One of the things the PIA did was create 2 regulators, which we didn't really have before. So it made DPR the Upstream Regulatory Commission and then transformed PPR and other agencies to the downstream regulator. What I've realized in the last 1 year of implementation is maybe that was a wrong idea. Maybe what we'd have had was a single regulatory framework, which would have reduced the cost of doing business, allowed more regulatory oversight, and reduced the regulatory creep we're having right now in the sector. Because one of the things the people in the sector are burdened with is multiple taxes, multiple fines. And the scam issue is this. Nigeria has too much of government in business. The NNPC Limited, which has been relatively commercial, has not yet understood its commercial rules as properly. You see from time to time, the NNPC still issuing regulations, issuing rules and others. You haven't seen the NUPRC step up to its role properly or being the key upstream regulator. The downstream authority is still struggling to understand its role and how to deliver it. So those things might be reviewed under the PIE, and those things might be strengthened. Also, the ownership of NNPC PL Limited should be revisited again in the PIE. Right now, it seems to be owned by the federal government, and I think the best thing for a government of a country is owned by the federation. But these are things the governors should think about and address and review the PIE. Why has gas not happened? Because we don't have significant infrastructure. Why don't we have infrastructure? Because we have significant investments. The laws are there. The plan is there. The gas master plan has been there for a long time. The network codes, other things that should make gas active has been happening. But we still don't have the investment necessary for gas to become something utilized. So relative to production, we're still very low. We have reduced flaring. Flaring used to be top 2. Now we're not top 5 or top 6. So we're better off in flaring. But there's still a lot of work to do there. What this government should do, or incoming government should do, is think about itself as an enabler of business. It shouldn't be the business. It shouldn't be the person doing the business. It should stand by and say, look, what do you need to make it happen? How do we support you with rules, with regulation, with laws? How do we ensure that the environment is safe enough for you to invest? How do we ensure we stand by the laws we pronounce? How do we ensure judiciary? I mean, all of us watched the Seplat issues. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to see Seplat, which we'd seen as a very good track for local investors, go to like a comedy, a farce. Judiciary was issuing laws, sacking somebody, revoking his staying in Nigeria. These are reasons why there are no investments in Nigeria. And until we tackle all those conditionalities, then we'll keep on having declining investment. The second part I want to talk about is government take. Government take has been shrinking yearly oil and gas. Government take is how much government gets from oil and gas. In the last 18 years, a barrel of crude has been saddled with so many takes from different agencies. Oil and gas funds, educational tax fund. Oil and gas funds, NDDC. Oil and gas funds, multiple of agencies. Our lawmakers sit down, and whenever they're looking for money to fund a new agency, oil and gas. So what happens is government is getting less and less from all that. That can be reviewed. You need to get more money. You need to get more take for government, because it is like your documentary showed, something that's going to be maybe not consequential in the next 30, 40 years. So what we must do that at the point in time is consequential, maximize the benefits for Nigerians, create other industries with it. Everybody that comes in says, we'll diversify, we'll diversify, we'll diversify. Nobody does it. Nobody can do it because there's no money to do it. When you can barely pay salaries from what you're earning from revenue, when you're using 90% of your earnings to pay your debt, when you decide to subsidize petrol, subsidize your dollar and everything, you can't solve your problems. So there are a lot of decisions need to be made by the incoming government, very hard decisions, very decisions that need political will. And if there's anything I would say, the biggest need is not new laws, not regulations, some amendments, but political will.
Well, talking about hard decisions to be taken, I'd like to ask you about the full liberalization and deregulation of the downstream sector, popularly referred to as removal of fuel subsidy. Now that the outgoing administration says, well, that decision will be taken by the incoming administration, how quickly should the incoming administration address that issue?
If this government is, the incoming government is wise, not too quickly.
Not too quickly?
Not too quickly, not too long. Not too quickly, because it's a crisis. Nigeria, the political subsidy has become a political issue, not economic. Every government that has come in since 1974 has tried to reduce subsidy. We've been having subsidies from 1974 after the Yom Kippur War. Every government tries to tackle it in different ways. Nobody does it directly. What I advise this government coming in to say is slow down, understand the issue properly, understand the landmines there, engage properly with stakeholders, determine what you give back to Nigerians in terms of palliatives. Do not make promises that are false. One of the false promises everybody government makes is the savings from oil and gas will be invested. There are no savings. Savings is a function of, I want to spend 10 naira, I spend 5 naira. When you have 6 naira, I spend 25 naira. When you stop spending 20 naira, you're not saving any money. You're cutting waste. So no lies. Don't tell Nigerians, oh, the money will save. You're not saving any money. You're cutting waste. You have no money to invest in other palliatives. But you can think about how do you support the poorest of the poorest. So Mr. Tinubu and his team shouldn't be in a hurry to make a decision in the first month of government. What I think is a 6-month time frame is best for them. Talk about what you want to do, how you want to do it, engage and consult deeply with all stakeholders. Look at the impact on it on your foreign exchange. Look at the impact on it on inflation, on food prices. Look at the impact on it on the poorest of the poor. Think of mitigation measures, speak about them, then implement it in a phase stage. There's a reason why when you are taking some hard, heavy dose drugs, they don't give you injection at once. They give you in some small doses, so your body adjusts to it. Now, if you take too long to do it, then you lose the political will to do it. Then you get captured by those who have always captured every government that's come into power. But so I think they shouldn't rush into it. I'm happy this government has decided its decision to announce it before they left. I thought that was something not very kind. You can't have been in government for 8 years and not do something and do it at the last days of your government. That would be setting a landmine for the incoming government.
All right, let's talk about the investment you'd mentioned earlier on. Amongst the president-elect's plans when he sat with at the NESG to discuss some of his economic plans, he focused on the oil and gas sector, talking about it hopefully being the lifeblood of the nation's economy and improving that sector. One, he said, was going to strike some oil deals with some oil companies and do that very quickly. He talked about addressing the divestment that's been going on recently. And he also talked about improving fiscal regimes. You talked on the fiscal policy of this particular administration, but he had also said he was going to improve it further. Now, in terms of striking deals with oil companies, what would you suggest? What would be your recommendations as quick wins? What he should do immediately in terms of the details of some of the things he should do, and also, of course, how to attract investment or perhaps stop the divestment in this particular sector?
Okay, let me start from this number 2. You can't stop divestment in 6 months. Divestment plans are made years ago. The oil and gas sector doesn't work in 2-month plans. Plans are made 5-10 years before. What they do in the oil and gas sector is look at the scenario and make decisions for the future. So if Mobil or Shell has made a plan to divest from a field or not continue with Bonga or others, it wasn't made overnight. It was made over years of decisions. One of these things these guys do properly is they have good researchers, they have good information, and they make decisions based on economic indicators and planning. So whatever Tinubu will do will not be an immediate function. It will be a long-term function. But what he needs to do is do what he has been doing. I'm aware that he has teams who have been engaging with oil and gas people. I'm aware there have been submissions from the OPTS, from the IPPG. OPTS is the umbrella body of international oil companies. IPPG is another of independent people in Nigeria. They've had meetings. They've listed their demands. I'm happy that the NNPC has paid up the outstanding JVRS. About 3.80 billion was paid about a week ago. So those has been cleared up. But what you need to give to investors is confidence. In confidence in saying, I will follow the rules I set. The problem is not the rules you set. The problem is if you follow them. If you make bad rules and you follow bad rules, people would adjust to bad rules and say, we'll plan against bad rules. But people can't plan against uncertainty. Next thing he ought to do, which is very important, is he ought not to make himself the Minister of Petroleum. That would be a big error. All the people that have done it have largely failed in that area. You cannot be the president and Minister of Petroleum. Get somebody who is sound, who is from the industry, who has experience, who has a pedigree, who is trusted to be minister. Give somebody that portfolio, let that person run that portfolio full time. Number 3, strengthen the regulatory oversight. Right now, regulators are not really there. They are struggling. They are struggling because there are legacies from the NNPC, and therefore, NNPC still holds sway in determining the rules of the sector. Now, Mr. Kyari has done a marvelous job in NNPC. He's moved this industry much further, and he's tried to commercialize it, but there's still a lot of things that need to be done. So I think he must strengthen that area of space to keep investors' confidence in that area. Then, there's issues of foreign exchange, and which is one of the biggest issues we've had in investment declining. You can't have a country which has about 4 foreign exchange regimes having investors. If you have investors' money trapped in your economy, I mean, if I put money in any business, 2 things I want to be sure about. First of all, I will get a return. Second, if I can't get a return, I'll get my money back. If neither of these conditions are assured of me, then I will not put my money in it. So if people want to bring their money to Nigeria, they must be certain that when they are leaving, they'll get their money back. Okay. You can't have a situation whereby central bank is owing airlines money, is owing everybody money because they don't have enough foreign exchange to do it. And they have no foreign exchange to do it because the revenues from crude and oil, which produce 99% of our foreign exchange, or 96%, declining.
Okay. So 2 things. You talked about full payment. Are you really sure about the full total payment of all the JV partners? Because when you said that, I wanted to double check on that information. And secondly, you said we should wait for another 6 months before we cut subsidy. Who is going to pay the shortfall of about $4 trillion that will be the bill for not cutting subsidy in the next 6 months? Because the year is pretty much gone when it comes in. So who's going to pay that $4 trillion? Where are we going to pay it from? Should we go back to CBN and ask for ways and means to be able to augment for that? Who's going to pay that money?
Well, I'm not a fan of ways and means. Let me start with number 2. Ways and means for me has been a destruction of the economy. And I think that is one of the reasons why our naira has lost so much value. But again, you see, I said earlier on, the subsidy is not an economic decision alone. It would be an error to think it's only economic. I didn't say wait for 6 months. I said implement it over a period of 6 months, meaning that in the first 1 month, you can use that for consultation, reaching agreements, striking deals. Remember that a government coming in has to have legitimacy to make some hard decisions. When you don't have enough legitimacy and you take hard decisions, what you can have is a political catapult. And you have to be careful you don't do that. You need to have a stabilized economy first. I remember that we have issues around the legitimacy of whatever is coming in. We have court cases that need to be resolved. We have young people who are angry and such. We need to be careful that they don't latch on to any issue and make it political. And I said over the years, the petroleum subsidy has become a political issue. It's not economic alone. Now, so it's not a 6-month time you wait for. There's no money to finance it, but you can start the process, but do not rush into it. What I like about what he said in his plan is over a period of 6 months, not do it in 6 months, over a period. So start month 1, engage, understand, debate, have a planning. Month number 2, start process of maybe saying reduction over a period of time, cut it in half, over a period of time, cut it another 3/4, and everything. So it's slowly. Okay. Then, so you asked a question about how certain am I about the payments of JVs.
No, just wait before you answer that question.
Do you want me to finish on that?
No, let me ask you this before you pick on that. If you wait 1 month, the subsidy bill will go up to 600 billion. By the time you finish sorting out and earning goodwill after a month, you snowball into the 2nd month, the subsidy payment will be 1.2 trillion naira. So even if you are not even waiting for the 6 months threshold, if you have to wait 2 months, based on the 2022 report, the subsidy payment will have hitched up to 1.2 trillion. Who can afford to pay that 1.2 trillion as we speak today? How is it going to be paid for?
Okay, let me be honest and not political about it. How we paid from January to date. 2 years ago, I lost a bet. I lost a bet with my colleagues in oil and gas governance sector when I was assured, and I said certainly Buhari would remove the subsidy. I said that because I saw no hope or no ways for the government to pay subsidy at that point in time. I thought we were at a point where we were at the wall. But I realize in Nigeria, behind the wall, there's a hole that we can dig into it. So I am not saying I want ways and means. I'm not saying that's the best thing to do. But I say it again. I say it's a sense of responsibility. It's not an economic decision alone. It's a political decision. And you have to be careful how you take those decisions. How they'll fund it and source it, I do not know. I'm not saying the bill you said is not going to be, it's not true. But we've done it from January to June. We've done January to May. It's been done. We couldn't afford it since 5-6 years ago. 6 years ago, we couldn't have subsidy anymore. In fact, we couldn't afford it since 2007. Yet we afforded it to date. Now, the other part of it is you do it in a rush. You create a political upheaval. Do you want a situation whereby Lagos is shut down again for months? Do you want a situation whereby there's drought everywhere, NLC goes on strike? That will fetch more loss to the government, and the government start losing legitimacy and credibility. So in conditions where has long-term impact beyond short-term impacts, you have to be careful in making those decisions. You have to think both the politics, the economics, the outlook for it, and the repercussions of that. So for me, it's not one thing alone that causes it. So finance is one part of it, but the other issues are all there. Your second question about how certain am I about the payment to joint ventures?
Is it a totally clear
I'm not
debt?
Totally certain.
Okay.
I'm relying.
Very good. I just wanted to get that out.
I'm not totally certain. Yes. I'm using no. I'm relying on what the GCEO of NNPCL said. He said we've paid 3.82 billion. So I'm relying on his statement. Whether the oil companies have received that money, I am not certain. But he said that. I know it was one of the things they presented to the committee set up by the incoming president. That arrears. Now, if those arrears are settled, that's a very good clean state to start from this government. What this government should now then do is reduce that going forward. Maybe move away from joint ventures to independent joint ventures as suggested in the PIA, where you start looking at joint bills itself being their own, but it's a long-term thing.
Mr. Adigun, very briefly, as we begin to wrap up, this is a piece someone just sent to me. He says, this piece seeks to demonstrate that contrary to popular opinion by experts, the new Dangote stream is not a panacea to our energy sufficiency and sustainability. And part of his argument is that even with that 650,000 barrels of refined crude per day, translating into about 34.45 million liters, that there will still be a supply shortfall, and that Nigeria will still have to import to meet that shortfall. What do you think? He has other arguments there. I don't have a permission to mention his name, but this is, the kernel of his submission.
I agree with that submission. I've said that in other places as well. It's not the answer to our energy problems. Dangote Refinery is a fantastic initiative, a fantastic idea, would help in solving our problems. Our problems are not solved by a refinery. Our problems are solved by good policy implementation, what Refineries talked about, subsidy management and subsidy removal, and consistency in regulations and rules. That's what our problem is solved by. I know from my work that actual consumption in Nigeria, if we take out all the waste, all the corruption, is about 40 to 42 million liters per day. I know that we have to import more than that because we have to satisfy our neighbors who will take our petrol because of this differential in prices. That won't change if Dangote is on board. Because if your prices are still lower than the price of your neighbors, they will not buy from Dangote, they will buy from you. If I will make more money by dropping a tank at Badagry than putting in a petrol station, I'll take it to Badagry. It's an economic decision based on profitability. So I agree with what he said. The energy sufficiency is a big old issue. We have gas shortages. We have one of the countries that are, I think in the world, relative to production, we are number 8 in domestic utilization of gas. This government has tried to do a lot of work on it. But the fundamental thing is there is too much of government in the business. There's too much of government in the gas space. There's too much of government in everything in Nigeria. Government needs to move aside gently and allow private sector to come in. Private sector has a lot of money. You've seen a lot of money coming to fintech, a lot of money coming to other sectors of the economy where there's less government interference. So the oil and gas can get those investments. Okay. But it's going to be time.
Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Ademola Adigun, oil and gas expert, as we look at or examine the President-elect Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's oil and gas plans in the next 10 years as we look forward and count down to inauguration 2023.